Fala, galerinha! Esse é o primeiro episódio do nosso podcast Osteopatia Científica. Estou aqui com o meu amigo Leonardo Diniz. Pode falar boa noite para a galera, Léo.
Boa noite, galera. Prazer estar aqui. É uma coincidência, dois Leonardos, vai dar uma bagunça boa aqui. E a gente está chegando para criar muito conteúdo, muita gente competente, muita gente experiente, para a gente trazer para o nosso mundo científico.
E hoje, nada mais, nada menos do que David Poulter vai estar com a gente. E por causa disso, we are going to talk all this podcast in English or French, if you want to. But I think English should be better. And thank you very much for being here with us, David. And introduce yourself, please.
Thank you. And thank you for having me on your first podcast. Yeah, my name's David Poulter. I'm English-born, originally trained in England physiotherapist. I've had a long career, 41 years in the making, and as well as working in the UK for the first 6 years of my career, I then emigrated to Australia, to an outback town just north of Melbourne, probably 300 kilometres on the border between New South Wales and Victoria, and spent 6 years working in a very small country hospital. After the first year, set up a private practice in the town. And my wife was a nurse, so she worked in the hospital while I worked in my private practice. While I was at that hospital, I got the opportunity to do lots of courses. I went to Melbourne every weekend and did the McKenzie courses, which got me interested, and Maitland courses. And I had the opportunity to meet Brian Mulligan when he was doing his first courses in Australia. So I got interested in manual therapy and self-treatment. I then got the opportunity to come to the US and attend the first McKenzie conference here. And that sparked my interest more in the McKenzie system. And in, I think, 1994, I went to New Zealand to do the McKenzie diploma course. And after doing the course, which was a 10-week course, Robin McKenzie, who taught the course, invited me to come back to New Zealand and actually teach the course. So in 1994, I went back to Australia, sold my practice, and returned to teach the course 10 weeks later. So I spent 3 years in New Zealand developing and teaching the McKenzie diploma course with Robin. And then in 1997, we moved the course to where I live now, to Coon Rapids, Minnesota, in America. So I've lived here in Coon Rapids 28 years. I taught the McKenzie course for another 6 years in America. And then we parted ways for various reasons. And I went into a clinical practice job, managing clinics, working for a big American corporate company. Then left that, carried on my own teaching. And my last two jobs have actually been setting up PT practice in chiropractic clinics. So that has been an interesting challenge. But I've continued to teach, I present, and I teach my own courses in America and around the world. So that's me in a nutshell. The other interesting thing is I did volunteer and spend some time in Africa, in Niger, hence why speaking French was an advantage. So that was a very humbling experience.
And a cyclist too.
Yes, and I'm a cyclist. And when I say I'm a cyclist, I do a minimum of 4 hours a day, so every day. So I'm a addicted cyclist.
We have a podcast, a scientific podcast. So we are going to start with some news of the North Hemisphere that happens just yesterday. The solar eclipses. So what happened in your life in the solar eclipses yesterday? Did you change your anxiety, your mind? What happened to you?
You're asking me. I went out cycling, and in Minnesota it was cloudy. So the only thing we saw was clouds. I managed, and in fact I posted on Twitter, I did get a partial view of the eclipse. We only had the partial view. So we weren't in the track of the total eclipse. That moved from Texas and went at an angle up to New England, I think. But my wife's a flight attendant, and one of our pilots took a picture from the cockpit, which I posted on Twitter just a few minutes ago, which is beautiful because it shows the Earth and the curvature of the Earth and the eclipse, and it going light and dark over the Earth. So... But the rapture was supposed to take place too, I think. The Christians believe that Jesus was returning yesterday.
Yeah.
But he didn't turn up. So
We didn't saw
What
anything.
changed in your life?
nothing happened. We're all still here.
Everybody here. The aliens didn't come.
No, nobody arrived. Well, in America, there was word about the border that the Mexicans were going to run across in the 3 minutes of darkness.
Yeah.
There was
Nobody
that.
saw them.
That could be a chance. Okay.
Instead of waiting for the night, they use the 3 minutes of eclipse to get across
We
the
got
border.
3 minutes now. Go.
Yeah, well, welcome to America.
We're still here applying KT tapes and ozone therapy.
But I heard that you were having problems that you might get Twitter banned in Brazil.
Yeah.
Probably it's gonna happen.
Interesting.
We have a big trouble in politics here. So it's I don't know when it's gonna finish and where we are going to be when it's done.
We're going through hard times here. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, maybe we will meet on blue sky.
We have another thing to ask you.
Sure.
What do you think? What do you have in your past that should never be ended? Like a cartoon or a candy, or what do you like in your in your childhood? What do you remember?
What's the thing that you miss that ended?
Do I remember my childhood? Of course, just about.
A long time ago.
A long time ago. One of the things I miss the most, and I don't know if this is still the case, is the library. And the reason I say that is, even though I'm old, I turned 65 last week, but I am tech savvy. I use a phone, I use 2 iPads. I'm on Twitter every day, as everybody knows who follows me. But one of the things I miss is the peace and quiet of going to the library. I love books. I love the smell of books, the touch of books. And I think we've replaced that. There's going to be a generation who just read things on their phone and never actually touch or manipulate or feel an art. And I think reading sometimes is a tactile response too. It's not just observing something, reading it on a phone. And I think Kindle did that to people too, where people download a book. And I think if they could just bring back proper old-fashioned libraries where we could go. And not only that, it's actually a social event where people went to get warm, read newspapers, read books. And I think we're losing most of our libraries. So that's one of the things I miss the most. When I was at university, there was no such thing as computers, Google. In fact, the computer you used to have to make a long ticker tape. I don't know if you're old enough to remember. And you used to take it to a room and they'd feed it into a computer, and a week later you get an answer. So that was what I had when I was doing my research at university. But I think some of the things of those days without computers, we could probably learn and go back to them. It would be great. So get rid of the phone. That's what I say. In fact, it's funny that you WhatsApp me because I don't use my phone. My wife was giggling when I was receiving texts. I have a phone that I never use. So
we don't need Google anymore. We have wives,
Yeah.
I don't think Google is
they're always right.
we are married.
They tell you when you're wrong. Google doesn't.
That's not no need, but that library I think we are gonna have a new generation that have lot of information, but they don't have knowledge.
They don't know what to do with the information.
You have the information all the time, but you don't have knowledge to use it properly. That's the difference that the library does in your life: the searching, the reading.
But despite of the time between us, your graduation and ours, I'm sure you agrees with me. We started the graduation. We didn't have the internet available all the time, and we had to study with books. We had to look for articles in books and in magazines and physical magazines. It took 2 weeks, 3 weeks to get a paper to read. And the books
Copy.
that arrived in Brazil arrived with 4 or 5 years delay because of the translation process.
Right.
It was a time of much more effort of ours to get educated. So we know where to look for the information. We know what to do with the information. And I agree with you. That's a shame that libraries are ending.
Yes, we used to, that's the other thing, the art of taking notes, and I don't mean taking notes in class, I mean taking a note and writing down the essence of an article.
That's another thing about the articles, yeah.
Absolutely, writing down the essence of an article and then coming back and putting it in your own words and looking at it for revision purposes, whereas now you've got AI, cut and paste, there's no effort in anything. So people wonder why you can't remember articles. Well, it's because you've had no interaction with them, as in physical or reflect. Writing down a note and then reading it back is like a form of reflection. It's like patient notes. Now we've gone to computerized electronic notes, that people are missing the value with their patients of reflecting while writing. I mean, it's fine, you're typing while somebody's talking. But the difference is when you write it down after, or you reflect back to a patient while you're writing, there's an essence in that allows you to remember your patient. Or it allows you to reflect the clinical reasoning to the patient while you're writing it out.
It is part of the learning process. It's something that you just transcribe in what he said, what you've read into some physical form, and that effort brings you to a awareness of what you're doing, and that's learning.
Well, I read an article recently that only 10% of people have what's called an inner voice. And I ponder, I don't understand how that's possible, even though it's supposed to be scientifically true. How do people read without an inner voice or write without an inner voice? It seems strange that, and it may be that we become so dependent on technology that people are losing the ability to talk to themselves and reflect in their own brain.
That's why we're disconnecting with people nowadays. It's just...
How many books do you have in your house?
How many books? I have, I'm lucky that I've got a large house. I have an office, 2 offices downstairs in my basement where my workout room is. And I can say I have a whole, I've never thrown them away. I still have all my books and notes from PT school. So that's 44 years ago. I have all my textbooks. My wife's very into reading. In fact, just as I'm sitting here now, there's books. Our house is full of books, which if you go into modern houses, like my daughter has a house, no books, apart from the children's books.
That's the difference.
People don't go to bookshops or touch books or around books anymore.
Yeah. So, I have all my books too. That's a habit that I have that I think is necessary for me to review sometimes. That's the difference, that where we learn, where we came from.
And now I have filing cabinets full of papers that I've copied from PT school and when I was teaching. But of course, modern times now I can store so much more on an iPad, but it's still nice to have the papers and
all that books you can have in a pen drive.
Yeah. But it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
As having the physical book. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think you've just echoed on it, that everything in the world is available to us on the internet. But that doesn't mean that we're any wiser for that.
On the contrary.
Yeah. Well, I think it makes us dumber.
We don't
dumber. Need all things. We just need to look them up.
Yeah, we're becoming dumber. Yeah. Because of that. Because of that easiness of to find things. We just don't have memory anymore.
Yeah.
There is some studies that say that now we have the first generation of kids that are dumber than the fathers.
Yeah.
The IQ.
Yeah.
The IQ is lower than the fathers.
I have children, yes. I have a son, a daughter, and 3 grandchildren.
Wow.
So hopefully I'm still smarter than them all. let me tell you, they don't think so. So my experience is when you have children, and anybody listening with children will relate to this, is your children think you're clever till they're about 10. And then from 10 to about 25, they think you're the dumbest person on the planet. And then when they get to 25, they start realizing you're actually not as dumb as they thought you were. And then when you become a grandfather, you're really clever because you have all the money.
Yeah. You have the power.
Yeah. So, but I agree. Yeah, it's. I don't think having information available doesn't make you smarter. I think it's how you use that information that is important.
That's the difference between information and knowledge.
Yes.
Nowadays we have a lot of information. Everything you want, you can click it, then you have it.
Yeah.
But knowledge is completely different. That we see in physical therapy, for example, in osteopathy. We have a lot of information, and there's some guys that decide to use cupping therapy. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I often split education into need to know, nice to know, and where to find it. And that's then the need to know is the safety aspects of our job, the clinical reasoning in our job. Nice to know are the references and people who say, oh, such a body study in 1925. And where to find it is everything we don't know, which is just on Google or on the internet.
Yeah.
But the essentials of our job. Neil deGrasse Tyson gives an example, and I've done some tweets and threads about it, that if you ask somebody, what's the height of the Eiffel Tower? You can go and look it up on Google, or you can memorize it. But he points out, wouldn't you rather employ somebody who could calculate or knows how to calculate the height of the Eiffel Tower? Practically applying knowledge rather than memorizing it or looking it up. That's what you say, if I want to employ an engineer, I'd much rather him say, I don't know what the height is, I can guess it, I can look it up, but here's how we calculate it. So he can problem solve his way through calculating the height of the Eiffel Tower, which is a much more important practical skill if you're employing an engineer than the person who says, yeah, it's whatever, 362 feet or whatever. So, and I think that's what we have to, we idolize people who can remember papers or post on Twitter and demonstrate how clever they are by recalling things. But I'd much rather listen to somebody who can reason through a problem without knowing the answer. Meaning, this is the probability or this is the likelihood of this being a fact, even though I don't know the exact answer. And I think that's how we are with our patients. That if we're honest, this thing of uncertainty, when people worry about uncertainty, well, I don't know the answer because I've never met them before. The only person who's likely to know the answer to any patient problem is the one who's bringing it to me. So I have this one witness that mainly you say, we have one witness, they have one witness, we have none, meaning the patient is their own witness and we are the person extracting and listening to the knowledge. So as clinicians, I'd much rather somebody be able to work things out than tell me the answer.
Because I agree. The thing is that uncertainty is just the thing that drives us to clinical reasoning. Because if there's no uncertainty, we just can't move forward from a primary contact and the exposition of the things by the patient, and then work on something. That's the main reason we have to work on clinical reasoning. And we're missing that. We're losing that.
I'm more likely to be certain of what you don't have. And even then, I could be wrong. So I'm never absolutely certain. And this is what I say when we talk about clinical reasoning, we should really talk about things like Bayesian probabilistic thinking, so that, what is the phrases like, I'm much more impressed by clinicians who say there is a chance that. There is more a chance or a probability at than somebody saying, oh, this is what you got. Yeah, it's really about probabilities rather than being absolutes.
Yeah.
That's another problem. We have another problem with internet, that the patients would just put on Google, I have low back pain. And then
it's cancer on Google.
And then it came to us, I have low back, I have a sciatica, so you need to do this or that. How do you manage that in your clinical practice?
So and I've written about this and talked about it a lot. When a person comes, it's the first time we're interacting. Most of the time, you're meeting a person for the first time. So it's like meeting, I've just met you two guys. How do we interact in a cordial and professional manner with this individual? And some of the stuff that goes on social media, oh, we challenge their belief. No, I want to understand their beliefs, not challenge them. So I have this thing of ethos, pathos, logos. Ethos meaning from the Greek, gain trust, ethics. Pathos, seek to understand, and logos, logic, then be understood. So the first rule of any clinical interaction should be to gain somebody's trust. And the last thing you're going to do if you challenge them is gain their trust. So by seeking to understand an individual's belief system is where we should start at. Meaning, yep, you're absolutely right. There's this thing called epistemological injustice, where people ignore the patient's narrative or understanding or beliefs. It should be the other way around. Whatever the patient believes doesn't make it fact, but it makes it important for us to understand. My role in this relationship is to build an alliance. And I can't build a therapeutic alliance or a relationship if I don't understand where you're coming from. And so I often use the system, and I know there's these systems of collecting information. I'm losing my train of thought of what they're called, but I'll come back to it. But if you reflect back to a patient what they've said in a respectful manner and ask them how realistic it sounds. So example, somebody comes for cupping, and we go through a narrative, and we receive their history, and we have a chat, and we start to build trust. I often reflect back to somebody and say, did you ever have a love bite as a child when you were in a romantic relationship where a girlfriend sucked on your neck and it left what we call a hickey or a love bite? And they often say, oh yeah, I did them to myself, or yeah, somebody else did them. And I say, how therapeutic was that? And they just look at you like, well, why would that be therapeutic? Or have you ever banged yourself and got a bruise? How therapeutic was that? And then you discuss, well, if you look at cupping, it basically is giving yourself a love bite or a hickey. And yet you're willing to ask for that as a therapeutic treatment based on maybe something you've seen on the internet. Now, if that's where you want to go, then I can recommend you to go somewhere that provides that. But realistically, should we look at other ways of helping you? That may be other things you can do. So I always say to them, imagine at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're in bed and you wake up suddenly and your sciatica's back. How are you going to get some cupping? Now, if you can't access cupping, would you like to learn some ways of treating that at 3 a.m.? Because if we can't do that, then we're doing a disservice to you as a therapist. Yep, you can have cupping when the lights are on and it's light and there's no eclipse. But what are you going to do at 3 a.m., which is the common time? People wake up, get up to go to the toilet, and the sciatica's back. Wouldn't you like to learn some strategies to self-help that during the middle of the night, which then you can carry through to the day too? So you may decide, yep, I'm going for cupping, but I may also decide that I'm going to do things that will help myself in the times that I can't have my cupping. So I'll never say to them, oh, don't go to cupping, it's pseudoscience. Because if the belief is still that that's what they want, then who am I to question that? And we all know the placebo effect and the contextual effects will have an effect on it if that's their belief. But this thing of, oh, we should challenge the beliefs. No, I should understand the belief. I'm not their father. I'm not going to chastise them for having a belief that isn't my belief. So it's back to this thing. Can I gain trust? Can I explain? Do they trust me enough where I can say to them, maybe we don't need cupping. Maybe it's something we can try if necessary.
Easier way of handling it. You're saying we have to start first believing in their beliefs, and then working out and showing other ways of thinking and explaining that there are other symptoms and ways of treating, and that maybe, and just maybe, as you said, at 3 a.m. in the morning, you just don't have cupping available.
Quite. And
What you're
then,
going to do?
yeah, what would you do then? What would you like to do then?
Yeah. We have to believe their beliefs first, and then try to reason with them what's true, what's not true, what really helps. And okay, you like cupping because it makes you feel good, but okay, there's no problem of using it. But know this, maybe it won't help you in this or that situation. And we start from there and gain trust, and slowly build therapeutic alliance to change the way of thinking, and try to lead to some more practical for self-management and self-efficacy about pain and coping with the problems.
Yeah, and some of the other avenues that the younger therapists may forget, and even some of the older therapists like me, is this person has made an informed choice to come and see you. So understanding why they've made that choice, because it's a big ask, and I don't know how it is in Brazil, but to get to sit in front of me takes a lot of effort. We forget that, because often it involves either seeing another practitioner like a doctor who refers you, or you've self-referred, or you've been recommended. Then you have to come to reception, then you have to fill in paperwork. So you're actually making an effort. And I say this to young therapists, when that person sat in front of you, you should respect the fact they've made an effort and a choice. So whatever happens, and if you contradict their belief right off the bat, you're basically saying to them, you've just wasted all that effort. My job as a clinician is to seek to understand why you sat in front of me. And often we have windows of opportunity where the patient says, have you had therapy before? Well, yes. And is that why you sat in front of me? Often it is, yes. And they often say, oh, well, most of the time it just fails if they've been sent by somebody. I often say, good, let's start a new list. And I'll be on this list at number 1, where it is a therapist who's going to listen to me, but not be on a list where he says they never helped me. Because part of my job is to find out, are you in the right place? Am I the right person for you? Am I the right fit for you? Are we going to have a relationship? This is like dating. This is like a first date. That's basically what it is.
We have to be really honest with the patient, to say to them that, well, I'm not the person to treat you. You have to look for someone else, because I just don't know what's happening. That's about honesty. And you said it, for them to be sad in front of us, it's a choice. He passed through other professionals. He maybe was frustrated with the results, and then he's still in pain. He's still suffering. He's not believing anymore in a way of getting better. And then when he's there, it's a choice. It's a leap of faith in what you can do. Yeah. And you're right. We have to be very humble to accept that person has an expectation about our work, and we have to be so honest to tell him the truth. Well, I can't help you. I can't help you.
Yeah, but, and I always put, but I know somebody who can, or somebody who may.
Yeah.
And so this thing of, I think as PTs, and maybe, I don't know about osteopaths, we're very poor at referring to other PTs and other osteopaths. And when you work in long enough in an area, I often say to people, look, this problem, you've got dizziness. I know what it is. You've got an inner ear problem, but I don't specialize in the techniques that would treat that. I'm just giving you, and I know somebody down the street who is absolutely, that's all they do day in, day out, and they're going to be the person that will help you the most.
Yeah.
And so it's, how do you feel about that? Can I refer you on? I can get you in this week sometime to see them. But I think we're really bad sometimes at saying, this is the limit of my job. This is where I am with you, but I know lots of other people who can help you.
And that's, I think it's the main problem of the osteopath.
Yeah.
Especially here in Brazil.
It is also.
Yeah, we have a kind of God syndrome.
Yeah.
We osteopaths, we know everything. Every patient is mine. I know everything to do with him. And that's not real.
No, it's the thing of, if I can't fix you, nobody can. And the thing I say to people, look, I know my limitations, but I do know this is where I say I know certain things, but I need to know who can help you if I don't know how to do this. And doctors are much more attuned to doing this because they have specialities. And they refer to colleagues. They're so used to, most people are so used to going to the general practitioner and get referred to a specialist. That's not the case in physical therapy or osteopathy, by the sound of it. We are the specialist, but you can't be a specialist in everything, and that's the problem. I often say my speciality is listening to human beings, or listening to individuals, or being person focused. And from that skill, I can tell you who you may need to see, or if I can help you. And I can offer you solutions by helping you self-treat, or I can refer you on to somebody who you need to be sat in front of.
Very right. We are going to talk about something that you mentioned now, that is person-centered manual therapy.
Okay.
How do you explain that?
That's good. That's a really good. And I've changed the name of that. In fact, I wrote a letter recently that's called person-centered. In fact, person-focused is what I'd like it to be changed to in my head. And I've been we've just written a paper, a group and I, and throughout we switched from patient-centered, person-centered, and person-focused, patient-focused. And we decided in the end that person-focused is a much better term to be consistent with. And the reason I say that is it will help the narrative when you talk about manual therapy, because person-focused utilizes the whole person. One of the things I have a bugbear about is we've become used to jargonistic talk. I'm sure it's the same in osteopathy. We're all becoming biopsychosocial, my little rabbit ears. And I think people utilize that term in their own image. And we do what's called a mereological fallacy, which we split it up in bits.
I am pretty sure 90% use the term and don't know what really means.
Correct. But even when they do know, they split it up into its bits. They say, well, I look at the bio and then I consider the psycho and the social. Yeah, but that's not how it is. And the example I always give is, look, milk, bio, egg, psycho, flour, social. Mix them together, cook them, it's a pancake. You can't undo that. You can't unmake a pancake. Which means when a patient comes to you, they have a biopsychosocial pancake that they made themselves. You have no idea how much milk, eggs, or flour. They do. But that's the contributing factors to their, what I call the human ecosystem. They are an ecosystem that has a problem. And of course it's biopsychosocial, not even, it could be spiritual too. It could be a lot of other factors we haven't identified, but it's baked into a pancake when they arrive. Our job is to say, these are the factors we can identify that might people often say, well, they're not sleeping well. Of course I'm not sleeping well, I'm in pain. That's not the causative factor, that's a contribution factor. So it's this thing, what mediates, what moderates, what produces. So while I'll have a rant about the biopsychosocial, so let's agree this, biopsychosocial is reality of human living. It means I'm an individual, I'm an ecosystem, I'm interacting in other ecosystems. I come to a clinic, which is your home, your ecosystem. You are used to it, I'm not. So if you think I'm behaving strangely, how about this is the first time I've been in your home? So all these things we say, are you feeling distressed? Well, of course I'm feeling distressed. I'm sat in front of a professional practitioner who I'm seeking help from. That's nothing to do with my condition. That's just part of my ecosystem worry. So when we look at manual therapy, we have to define, are we talking about the person, the system, the hands-on, or the technique? So there's 4 elements it could be. So let's talk a bit globally. Manual therapy is just a way of thinking through when that person sat in front of you in a probabilistic manner. And is it in historical terms and in osteopathic terms, because I'm familiar with Still's work, is there some osteopathic lesion, i.e. something not quite in alignment that's causing a life force change in this person? If you're a chiropractor, is there a subluxation? If you're a McKenzie therapist, are they deranging? If you're a Mulligan therapist, has it slipped on the facet and it's stuck? If you're an osteopath, is the pelvis twisted? Is there an upslip? So all these terms are just probabilistic mechanical thoughts. And this is why people switched up this biopsycho. That's not how humans function. A human being comes and sits in front of you, and what they relay to you is, I'm in an ecosystem and I'm distressed. Now, is my level of distress due to my painful condition, or is it part of this current experience that's in front of you? And we don't have to answer that, but we have to be aware of that as practitioners. And you may see as the person comes several sessions, they relax and are less stressed. Is that because of treatment, or is it they just got used to the environment? So all these are impossible to answer as clinicians, but they are positive changes. So manual therapy. Is this something I'm going to put my hands on? Is the traditional sense. This person sat in front of me, do they need me to slap them? Do they need me to manipulation? Do they need me to caress them? Massage? Do they need me to touch them? Just to hug them? As in, they need to feel better that a human's in contact with them. And if you think of the grades of manual therapy, it really is just like a hug, a rub, and a slap. A sense of, yeah, get back in alignment. But this is what it is. Do I need to touch you? That's all you're asking if you're a manual therapist. Is there some part of this person's narrative that I'm receiving suggesting at some point today, when I'm interacting with them and understanding them, that I actually need to lay my hands on in a therapeutic manner? Whether that be to caress, to touch, to pat, to cuddle, to reassure, to guide, or I need to rhythmically do that for some reason, or I need to do that with a force that's gentle but accelerated, not high velocity, but accelerated, meaning I'm going to manipulate them. And only by receiving the narrative history from the person who I'm focusing on. You see where person focus comes from? Person focused means I'm putting this person under what's called a macroscope, not the microscope. Traditional osteopathy, traditional chiropractic, traditional manual therapy puts people under a microscope. We focus down to the joint level or the tissue level. What I'm suggesting in a person-centered paradigm is you draw out and use what's called a macroscope. You sit opposite a person and see the big picture view of an individual in distress with a painful condition in a new ecosystem sitting in front of you. And you're asking them questions and receiving information. And notice how I say receive, not take. We don't take a history. We receive it by listening, by empathy. And what we really miss is compassion, which is the reason that we do things. Compassion drives you to help. Empathy only makes you feel what the other person feels. So this rational compassion in a person-focused paradigm where I've drawn myself out. I'm not focusing in, I'm actually focusing differently, like a camera where I've focused out. So I'm on the big aperture. I sit in front of you with my macroscope and listen empathetically to receive so I can be compassionate and assist you. And in that listening, I'm listening, do I need to touch you? I think it's a Boy George song. Do I want to hurt you? But as I draw out, is there anything in this history? For example, I'll give you an example. I was called a hypocrite on a course because I teach this method where it calls patient first, patient overpressure, therapist overpressure, mobilization, manipulation. And the first thing I did to the patient was touch them and they shouted, hypocrite! You said it's the patient first. And I said, yeah, but the patient was first. We've just sat for 20 minutes listening to the patient first. And all they could do was struggle about, limp, and stand in a shift. We asked them, could they stand up straight? They said, no, not since they started. We've just exhausted. We asked them to try to stand up straight. They couldn't. We've just exhausted the patient and any overpressure. The technique needed is maybe I assist them. Because that is what I'm focusing on, the person's need from what they told me. So it sounds like I'm doing hands-on first, but their history reception said, please help me and assist me. So when we talk about technique, all it is, could they do it without me? Could they do it without me quickly? Could they do it without me ever touching them? And if the answer to any of those is no, the question you ask as a clinical reasoning therapist is, which technique do I need to apply first? Could the patient touch themselves or use a piece of equipment that would apply an and when I talk about manual therapy, I generally just talk about it as a force progression. Could a patient touch themselves and assist their own movement with force? No. Could I touch that patient while they're moving and assist them with force? No. Could I relax the patient and do a technique where they are relaxed with rhythm and mobilization? No. Do they need me to do a high velocity, which should actually be high acceleration? Gentle procedure, which will create an internal F equals mass times acceleration. That's where the force comes from, because the joint needs some sort of adjustment, or the tissue does. Yes, and that, but it always comes back. If it's yes at any point, it always comes back to, can this person move themselves now without me? And if so, can they move without me and not need me to touch them again? So every visit will be, do I need to touch you again? And if the answer is no, then I won't touch you again. If the answer is yes, it's not me telling me that, it's the person who comes back and says, I can't without force. And that's a subtle clinical reasoning thing we haven't got time to discuss. But I don't decide that, the person's narrative does. So that's why I say it's focused on an individual, patient-focused manual therapy is, I may never touch you, but the focus is here to decide if we do, we draw out to say, does this individual have some sort of need for therapeutic assistance that is a force application externally, whatever you want to call it, if it's an osteopathic technique, if it's an adjustment, if it's a chiropractic adjustment, if it's a manual therapy mobilization, it doesn't matter. I have to listen to the patient who says, this is what I need. I often do mobilization on the first session if the exercises are working well. And people say, why did you do that? Because I give them to the patient as me speeding up the exercise in the same direction. Because this will take you 24 hours. 20 mobilizations for me will save your arms or save your legs, and it will be easier. And I will always hand it back to the patient to say, now it's your turn. So I don't ever have this problem, well, I did a technique, what exercise did they need? Because the exercise, the movements determined by the patient determines which technique. So there's never any question of which exercise the person chooses to do after the technique, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's the response within the session that you're looking for. You're working on one direction and you're waiting for the response to reassess what will you do next. But let me ask you this. What you said, you're very experienced professional. You have this on your everyday work as a basis of work. You do that all the time, every day. And what do you think is the biggest problem for the professionals today to work with the patient-centered approach?
I can tell you what my perception of the biggest problem is.
Yeah, of course.
So I've been watching a lot of presentations on our famous app, on the Twitter app, and a lot of podcasts. I have a fear for our profession. I don't know if it switches over to reading some of the papers of osteopathy. You have the fear too of what's happening in the bigger, wider world. we seem to be going down a trend, and I hate the analogy of the pendulum swinging, because pendulums don't swing the other way too far. It's physics, guys. Pendulums swing equal distance either way. That's why they don't smash, and they decay. So the pendulum's likely not to be swinging at any one time. So what we're doing, the analogy is, we're moving too far one way than the other. People are using this, and it's where we started, the biopsychosocial model of Engel. And by the way, 1970, Engel put that model together. It has no research on it. It has no scientific validity. It's an opinion piece. He just suggested that we switch to a biopsychosocial, and everybody's gone, yay! The closest you'll come to criticism of it is the enactive model by Peter Stilwell and his group. But let's go that way. People, what I fear is we're taking patients with chronic low back, and it's always chronic because everything's chronic these days, taking people with chronic low back pain and saying, let's do nothing to them. It's this nihilistic approach. Let's just talk to them after we've listened, give them education, give them the famous pain splaining or the pain neuroscience education, and then just say, on your way. You know, this is going to be a self-managed. We can support you with information on the internet, but coaching you is, look, there's no damage. You need some pain science education. Your body's just sensitized, and off you go. This seems to be the new way that people are doing, which means nobody touches you, nobody interacts with you. And the argument is, of course I do an evaluation. I do. I listen to the history. And the famous, I make sure there's no red flags. And then I just say to them, this is chronic, you're not damaged, and we encourage you, and you keep moving, and off you go. Yeah, great. If I was a patient, especially in America, I'm not coming back, and I'm thinking, yeah, that guy's crazy. That's just talk therapy, as people say. One more time, we come back to the store. When I meet a patient, they've chosen to come to see me. It's hard work to get to see me. And I want to know what their expectations are. And I've never had a patient who says to me, I just want some coaching and sending on my way. That's not why they sit in front of me. That's available on the internet most of the time. And I know I'm going to sound critical, and people are going to go, oh, he's an old therapist stuck in the past. He's a dinosaur. Well, that's fine. But most of the people I interact with don't ever say, when I say to them, what are your expectations of therapy and what would you like? They say, just a bit of information, please. If they do, then that's fine. Most people have expectations. Something young therapists need to think about is, vast majority of people, if 80% of people get low back pain, we're seeing probably 0.5% of it as a group. Otherwise, we've been run off our feet forever. 80% of a population of America will be millions, hundreds of millions of people coming to see us. The average person, and I say this with my hand on my heart, doesn't come for treatment. They cope. So there's the first word. They cope on their own. So the average person either, like we said, could Google, or they're not distressed enough. In a biopsychosocial world, these people are not distressed. They do not come for treatment. I can hand on my heart, I am 65 years old and have never sought treatment for a musculoskeletal problem. And people say, well, you're a professional. That doesn't really matter. I've had some serious injuries. I'm just a normal person. My wife never sought help, apart from occasionally I interrupt and say, are you sure you don't need some of this? But that's the average person. So when we see a person sat in front of us, number one, they're not the average person. Number two, they're not coping. That's the biggest picture thing. They are not coping, or else they wouldn't be sat in front of us. They are a person that we've labeled a patient. That's why I prefer the word person focused. Because when you leave the clinic and you're better, you're no longer a patient. You're back in, and that's why I say to my patient, look, you don't come back here unless you need help. And these are the strategies we assist you with so that you don't ever need to come back. This is a program of self-treatment. So before you come back, try and self-treat. That's our contract together. That's what we've been doing together while you've been in the clinic. But when you do need help, I'm more than happy to see you, because you won't be coping. That's the reason to come and see somebody. If you cannot cope, if it's too painful, if you can't work, if it's interrupting your life, if you can't cope in your relationships. This is where biopsychosocial matters. It's about coping in society, coping with things you enjoy. Bogduk used to say, when you're getting patients better, don't use work-related goals, sex and golf. People are more interested in getting back to sex and playing golf than they are going back to work. When you get them back to sex and golf, they should be at work. And it's this thing of people come because pain or a condition or physical disability is interrupting their ability to have joyous life experiences. So one more time, when that person sat in front of you, they're not coping. That's understanding number one. How do we assist this person in their journey to go back to life and can cope without us? So that's my biggest misinterpretation of what we do is we are people who facilitate other people in pain and give them the ability to cope. Doesn't mean they'll be pain-free. And there is the ability to, if I can cope with my condition, then you don't need me anymore.
Yeah, makes sense.
You just answered most of my questions.
That's what happens when I just rabble on about nothing.
I don't have any more questions, sorry. Thank you. I don't have any more. I was going to ask about hands-on and hands-off. How much do you use? You answered that.
Yeah.
So I don't
see what people always say that. Oh, are you a hands-on therapist? Yeah, when necessary. And they say, when's necessary? When indicated. And people go, oh, you just avoid it. No, if you come on my course and watch me with an individual, you'll know the point where you're thinking he's going to put his hands on. Of course you do, because I didn't say that, they did.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. And it's not, this is the thing about manual therapy. Just because you touch somebody doesn't make it manual therapy, but more than likely, if you're a therapist and you touch somebody, it's part of manual therapy. Guiding somebody is a form of manual therapy. Showing somebody how to do an exercise, I'm doing it now, guiding them is because I always say this, when two humans, if I touch another human, we both exchange something. And I know this thing of, I can exchange skin temperature. People say, why did you touch him? Well, he was clammy. That's why I touched him. His skin felt moist. He looked pale. That tells me he's diaphoretic. He's having a sympathetic response. There's more to touch. He was hot to the touch, or he was cold to the touch. His limb was warm. Look, these are all basic skills that I still think are part of manual therapy. If I have a knee, person comes in with a painful knee, I touch the knee for many more reasons than manual therapy. I'm feeling for edema, feeling for swelling, I'm feeling for heat, I'm feeling for sweating, because they're all part of a tacit subliminal. I don't say to them, oh, you've got to do this because you're going to measure all these things. No, I'm an experienced clinician, and when I put my hands on your body, you feel it and I feel it. My intent of touching you is nothing to do with making you feel better, but it may. My intent is to say, what is your, subliminally, and we forget this, how does this skin feel? Does it feel hairy and scaly and rough? Does it feel warm to the touch? Or is anything pulsating? Is anything feel abnormal? Just the fact that they withdraw when you try to touch them. That all these things are just tacit knowledge that's stored from experienced clinicians. Saying don't touch your patients is just a ridiculous statement, because I touch you and I receive information. Now, what that information is sometimes I'm not even thinking about it, but if I touch somebody and they're extremely hot and sweaty, that's important for me to register. And that may be part of the condition. And it'll register because subliminally the clinical reasoning will say, okay, this limb is hot to the touch. And I was thinking, is this an autoimmune disease? That is another part of the probabilistic picture I'm collecting as I go through as a clinician. It's red, hot, shiny. Well, we're confirming even more. But to touch them is to introduce yourself to them too. I always say TENS, TENS, the electrical stimulator. Well, I use TENS in the clinic. It's touch by shaking hands, or if it's permissible. Eyes, look them in the eyes, speak their name and smile. It has a dynamic effect on every patient you meet. Touch, eyes, name, smile. Hello, my name's David. What's your name? And smile. And it's this thing of connecting with another person. And by the way, you can learn a lot from shaking somebody's hand. And I always say this to manual therapists: when you shake a patient's hand, use the same grip you're going to use if you have to touch their neck. Because you know, men sometimes shake and it's like, oh, my hand. Well, my hand, if you did that, is now going on your neck in about half an hour. And they'll remember how your grip felt. So when you're a manual therapist, every handshake should feel like a caress, like you're holding a newborn baby. Even if it feels weak to you, but that hand, your hand, may be on their neck next. Yeah. And they will remember how your handshake felt.
For sure.
Yeah. Everything, I always say, everything we do speaks to the patient. Remember, when we are clinical reasoning, this is called narrative reasoning, the patient is also reasoning. If you feel uncomfortable in the presence of a patient, I guarantee you they feel uncomfortable in your presence. I always say to my students, if the patient, when they used to come out and they look distressed, I'd say, my goodness, you've got a distressed patient. And they'd say, what do you mean? I said, well, you're all disheveled and distressed, which means they are. Because you can't come out distressed if your patient is sat there relaxed and happy. So sometimes they are reasoning. Remember, you can't help a person who doesn't come back to see you. And it's back to this thing of ethos, build trust. And it's more than one. They are, everything you are doing to them, they are thinking about you just the same.
I believe we have the thing going on these days that most of the patients and the new professionals, maybe some old ones, when you say you're working with McKenzie, Mulligan, Maitland, osteopathy, there's a misinterpretation of what it is. People think it's, well, McKenzie, it's just a technique. No, it's not. It's not a technique that you're applying to a patient. Osteopathy, it's not a technique. It's a philosophy. It's a way of thinking.
Yeah.
And that's the problem for manual therapy today. People come to us looking for a technique to be applied to them, and it will magically solve their problem. It's just, it's not happening.
Bullets. Yeah.
It's a process. And we're struggling with this today, and it's hard to tell them, well, understand this. You're not coming to receive a technique that's called osteopathy. It's called McKenzie. It's you're coming here because we apply, we use a philosophy to look for what's working, what's not working. We have to get acquainted. I have to know you, you have to know me, so we can work together to find a solution, to find a way so you can cope with what you're suffering, with your pain, with your disability. But it's a process. We have to work together to get to a goal that's making you better, not walking better, playing sports, feeling better, have quality of life, being happy, being
Sex and goals.
free. Yeah.
Sex and golf.
I learned that.
Yeah. What do you say, Leo?
Just sex and golf. That's it. That's the goal.
Yeah. I mean, I just said what I think because of what I live here, and you live in another city with another reality. What do you see there?
Yeah. So I think I've got a unique experience, or experiential view. Having worked and trained in England, then having spent time in Australia in the outback, and then New Zealand in a big city, and now Minneapolis, which is a multicultural society, and then working in Africa where people have absolutely nothing, basically living in sand, kids cooking in the street on hot oil. What I've noticed is this: every patient I've ever met, no matter what country, is the same. They all have one demand. They want you to be a caring individual who assists them with their problem. How you do that is driven by us. And this is this thing of, when we talk about the word synergy, which is the Greek for working with. So we synergize with individuals. The problem is, I've come up with this term, antagonistic synergy. And I've done it from a practical element. If you make a fist, when we're at school, we used to learn, oh, antagonists are inhibited by the agonist when they work. We learned that as a basic principle. Oh, that's a principal thing. You can't use your biceps if your triceps firing off. And I always say, okay, that's not true. That's absolute garbage, because you can't make a fist that's a strong fist without both your flexors and extensors working maximally. And you can try it. If you put your hand by your elbow and make a fist, both your extensors and flexors work maximally. And you cannot supinate against a resistance without your triceps working. And people go, what? And I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you place your hand on your triceps and supinate against a resistance, just have a go. Your tricep works maximally. And people say, what? Well, that's synergy of antagonist and agonist working together. And that's what we're like with patients. Meaning, we have a synergy, an alliance, but we don't have equal roles. The patient is the expert, the narrative expert. I am the clinical expert. And this whole thing of, oh, Dr. Google. Well, yeah, the patient has a lived experience, and I have a practical experience of years of knowledge, of seeing people just like the patient. This is a unique individual, and I'm a unique clinician. And then we get together synergistically. And I have to say to some people sometimes, no, this is my advice. And this is what I call antagonistic synergy, meaning it may go against what they wanted. And I have this phrase, you may not get what you want, but you must want what you get. And it's a hard thing when we talk about therapeutic relation building. Meaning, I often say to patients, I understand. For example, I always give the example, I saw a young girl and her mother, she was a baseball player, a softball player. And they came to see me referred by one of my surgeons. And they said, go and see David, he'll have a chat. And they didn't tell him any more because the doctor knew what I was going to do. And I sat them down in front of me. And I often say to parents, anybody who's non-adult age, I often say to parents, okay, we have one rule in here, and that is the person with the problem is the patient. Anybody they bring has to stay silent. And parents just look at me, and the kids always go, whoa. And I do it respectively. And I say, the reason is it's not to be disrespectful. It's because I need to get the history reception from the patient, not the parent. Parents are second-hand witnesses. So respect. If we need your help, then we will ask you. So this was a 14-year-old, and the MRI showed a fracture of her pedicle at L5 from rotating and twisting. And the mother, and they took the history, and then they said, what's the treatment? And I said, for once, it's going to be absolute rest. And the mother turned to me and said, can we, this is exact phraseology, can we play tonight in the championship? It's the last match. And I said, okay, this is my role in this conversation. I am the professional with the professional advice. You are the mother with love and care of this individual who's the patient. So one more time. You can play, she can't. And she went, what? Well, I said, you said to me, can we play? Which means it's a vicarious statement parents often make. Can we? We're playing in the fight. No, she's playing, you're not. But respectfully, you can play, she can't. Now, what you do with that information is this. I'm the professional, she's the patient, you're the mother. You have to make motherly decisions for her for the rest of her future while she's under your roof. My advice to you as a mother is, no, she can't play. My advice to the patient is, no, you shouldn't play because you've got a fracture of a bone in your spine, which isn't serious and will heal quite successfully with graded activity. But you should not play tonight because there's a bigger risk of fracturing something else tonight and you're leading to other condition. So, Mum, should she play? Patient, do you want to play? You see the difference in, and I am now in a three-ring circus of what I call antagonistic synergy. Meaning, my role is to have the patient's safety. And that's what I said to her. You can do whatever you like. I can't force you, but you're under instructions from me and the doctor, because that's why you're saying here that you should not play, because this is quite serious. And it will be healed in 6 to 8 weeks, and your career will continue and you'll be fine. Play tonight and you risk further injury and damage that could be serious. So as a professional, you have to want what you get. I'm telling you, no, she shouldn't play, but I have no control over that. That's not my choice. I am a professional. You've come to see me. You sat in front of me for a reason, and that's my decision. And we will assist you in getting back to playing full sport. And they decided not to play. But I could have just had an antagonistic saying, how stupid are you? So in this three-ring circus, it's still back to understanding why they're here and understanding why they've come. And we have to realize as clinicians, sometimes we have to make hard decisions for people, but they still have to want that decision in the end. And that's the old art of diplomacy is getting another to have your way while thinking it was theirs. But it's this thing of, I have to make decisions as a professional sometimes, which goes against what you want. And in the end, and I have an advantage because I have a brother who's been to the Olympics, I've been a high-level sports person, and I just say to them, look, I'm 65 and I thought I would die if I could never swim. And in the last 40 years, I've never swum, so I didn't die. But I was at a point in my career where I thought if I couldn't swim, that would be the end of my world. Never was. I was the same with running. I 1 year qualified to run in the London Marathon. Didn't run because I'd hurt my Achilles. Wasn't the end of my life. Never has been, never will be. And you're going to go from 14 to 65, which is 41 years. And I can see that journey, you can't. So you see where I'm coming from is, it isn't that big of a deal if you miss the championship tonight. And the team won't miss you either, because some kid is wishing you weren't turning up, because it's their opportunity. So let's be sensible, and that's my advice, and you make the decision. That makes sense?
Yeah.
I don't even know what your question was.
Let me just tell you to advise us how to practice listen to patients. How can we practice that? It's not listening, it's actively listening to the patients.
Yeah,
how
it's
can
pretty easy.
Arrange
I can
that?
teach you a technique. So on my courses, I always say this. So whenever you formalize a question, you're doing it in your head. So the biggest problem with clinicians and younger clinicians is, and we've had a few just now, is the word, when the room goes silent. Everybody is human nature to want to fill silence with something. And if you're on a date or the first date, and remember, meeting a patient is a first date, silence feels like hours. But think about this, if I ask you a question, there has to be a point where you think about it. And so there must be silence. So in that silence, don't try and fill it. Don't try and think. And when another person's talking, don't be thinking of your next question. As clinicians, we sometimes ask a patient a question and they go silent. And I've seen clinicians do this, they rephrase the same question. And I'm thinking, well, aren't they just listening and thinking? Give them time to answer. And it's this thing of doctors interrupt every 8 seconds for that reason. So here's the thing. There's a cycle called intent, round to relevance, back to intent. Now, I don't know the Portuguese word for it, but intent in English is simple. They're just 6 trusty serving boys, and intent is why. Why am I asking this question? I must know, as a clinician, I must know the intent behind every question. I once on the McKenzie diploma course had a chiropractor, and I remember it like yesterday. He put up his hand and he said, I have never understood why we asked that question. And I went quiet. And I said to him, but you still asked it. And he said, oh yeah, it's on the form. And I said, repeat to me again what you just said. He said, I have never understood why we asked that question. And I went quiet again. And I just turned to him and said, then how did you ever understand the answer? And silence is powerful, isn't it? And it's like, oh, if you don't know why you're asking, don't ask. It's not a form we're filling in. It is an inquiry to a person who's giving us a narrative. So first rule, why am I asking a question? When I know why, I can ask. So you ask the question and you stay quiet because it's coming round a clock. I always say, think of a finger coming round a clock. You've asked it. And at the point where the patient answers, the relevance, who, what, where, why, when, listen to their answer. Now, don't listen to prepare a new question. Just listen to what they said. Like the woman, can we play tonight? And I look at from both of them thinking, you can. And she just looked at me like, what do you mean you can? Well, the word we is two people or more. So if we are trying to play, it obviously means you want to play. But she didn't mean that. She went, can they do? But it's stunning when you do it. So this is how you do it. Intent, why am I asking? Listen to the relevant answer. From that answer, you can only formulate your next question. So whatever they've just said, you can only say your next question from. And it's a game I play on courses. And it's damning when you do it because it's such a hard struggle for seasoned therapists. So first question is, for example, let's say this. How long have you had your current pain? Tick, 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 tick. Oh, I've had it for about 2 weeks. Your next question must be based on that answer if you're listening. And it can reflect back to, so 2 weeks. Prior to 2 weeks, were you feeling any other symptoms? So you see what I'm doing? I've just, with intent, asked the next question. Tick, 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 tick. Yes, well, now you mentioned that, I'd had some tingling in my foot before the pain started. Your next question must come from the answer. You see what it does? So it makes you be reflective in yourself. And at a point, there may be where that's no longer ability, and you say, that's really interesting. We've just asked 6 questions in my head. Let me reflect back to you what I've now found. So you've had this for 2 weeks. Prior to this beginning, the pain in your back, you'd actually had some tingling in your foot for 2 weeks. And that's what I've done. And they go, you're doing exactly what you're doing. Yep, nodding your head says yes. Yes, that's right. And I've got you. The minute somebody starts body language of trust, which is, yeah, you're cocking your head, you're nodding. It's like your dog. When your dog likes you, it does all sorts of facial. And they nod and they say yes, and you're gaining their trust. And you say, okay, now we've got that information. Let me ask you, have you had anything like this before? So with intent, I'm relating it to the global information I've received and asking them another question with intent. Their answer, tick, 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 silence. They're thinking. Yes, yes. I remember when I was in college, I had a similar episode. My brain. Okay. How do the two differ if they do? Or are they the same type of presentation? Patient gets to, you see how this goes round? Patient. Oh yeah, well, that one cleared up really quickly. This one's obviously been here 2 weeks. And that one seemed to just last for like a day or so. Okay. My thought. So is the reason you're seeking treatment this time because it's lasted longer? Yes. And so what we do, we're having this reception of information. And there's a good study by, in fact, one of my co-authors of a new paper, Maxi Beshek, which says patients, when she did a qualitative study, patients want 2 things from you. They want you to be receptive. That's the number one thing patients said, and they want you to be present. And both of those things are what I demonstrate when you being present in the moment, meaning as the patient, and you do it and I do it, as we listen, we nod and we acknowledge. And this ability, it's not my work, but I use it. It's from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits, is listening is not preparing to answer or to formulate a next question. Listening is to formulate a response where you paraphrase back what you've just heard better than the patient said it. So everything we've talked about, so let me just reflect back to you. This is what we've got. So this has been there 2 weeks. It started, we think, tingling in the foot. And you've had this before when you were way back in college. It didn't last long. It was 2 days. And I use this technique all the time because I often say to people, when a patient comes on the second visit and you don't have an assessment for them, what's your assessment? And they go, I don't know what you mean. I say, okay, how many patients have you seen? In fact, what have you sent me? It was the other Leo said, I've seen 7,000 patients in my career. He said that to me tonight and I giggled. And I say, on courses, have you ever been to the waiting room? And you take a chart and you walk to the waiting room or wherever your patients gather and you look at the chart and it says, Jim Smith or Jose Liberato. And you go, And you look around the waiting room and say to the receptionist, is he in the toilet or the restroom? And you go, no, he's in reception. And you go to reception and you look around and you think, no, I don't see anybody I'm familiar with. And you go, Jim? And he stands up and you think, must be somebody else's bit. And you wander back and you look in the chart and it's your handwriting or your notes. And you're thinking, I have spent an hour assessing and treating and listening to this person and I don't recognize it. That is what I mean about how many patients do you see. When I'm on courses, I always say day 2, I should be able to, without written documentation, say, good morning, Jim. We saw you yesterday and let me recap what we found. I should be able to relay back his narrative better than he did to me, just in a quick fashion. This is what we found. You'd been 2 weeks history, you'd had tingling in your foot, you'd had this before in college, this is a different episode, this is why you've come to see me. We found these things that we could do together. You demonstrated in the clinic that you could do this movement that would help your pain and it stopped your tingling, and you agreed that you would go home and use that as a treatment strategy. And this is the first question that I said would ask you, and the first question I'm going to ask you is, did you need to stop your exercises for any reason? Now, notice the difference in emphasis. Not, did you do your treatment? Did you need to stop doing it for any reason since I last saw you? Because that's the check of safety. The patient takes home the responsibility of being safe. If any reason, we talk about it on the court, any reason that this makes you worse or anything worsens, you will stop the exercise you agreed, did you need to stop? I don't care about if you've done the exercise. I want to know if it made you worse at all. The answer is no. Good. What has been the effect of the last 24 hours? Not have you done your exercises or treatment. What has been the effect? Because even without me, you could have been better. Why are you saying you're better? And then they will start talking to. Notice what I'm doing. I never say to them, did you do your treatment? And you're non-compliant, because this is not my treatment. And the other thing Maxie found was you have to be committed to your program and you have to be engaged. If you're not committed and you're not engaged, you won't do any treatment. And I've written this article. I wrote it in 1997, not 1993, so 31 years ago, about empowering patients and getting rid of this word compliance and replacing it with commitment. If I'm not committed to do my exercises, it doesn't matter what you think. They're my exercises. There's no such thing as non-compliance in my clinic. But it's like going to a restaurant and not eating your meal and then the waiter saying, well, you're non-compliant with eating food. Look, who's paying who here? And you can't use a term that's putative to a patient and say you're non-compliant. No, I came here for you to assist me. I chose not to do it. That just gives me a free choice. Isn't that what shared decision making is about? I chose not to do it. And there may be umpteen reasons why I chose not to do it, because I didn't have time, or I'm busy, or it made me work. That's why I start with, did it make you worse? What's been the effect? What caused this effect? Good. And if you haven't had time to do your exercises, we can start again and say, where do we need to go that you are more committed to doing something that helped you?
Okay, how can you help yourself, and how can you help me working with you? That's always when I see a patient coming back to me, my first question is, how are you?
Yeah.
Are you okay? Were you able to do your things? That's what I asked. Not did you do that? Oh, you didn't do. That's your fault. You're
So a
not there.
paradigm shift maybe for you is,
Yeah, I
what's
don't
the
do that.
yeah,
We
was
just
there a reason you had to stop doing your things?
why
I
didn't
always
you?
start with the safety first.
Yeah, of course. Are you feeling better despite of not doing it?
Yeah.
Were you able to do something better than before? How did you feel about that?
Yeah. I always
That's
joke, people
that's
come back and
scary.
say, much better than they start doing the opposite exercise that you gave them. In fact, my
Yeah.
wife did that once. I've written on Twitter about that I thought I'd given my wife extension, and she went and did flexion and felt much better. So even when it's this thing of seeking to understand that we got one chance doesn't mean they're going to learn it in one session. So whatever the patient's done is the correct thing, because it's bad education on our part if they got it wrong.
Yeah.
I really want to know a little bit more and talk to you a little bit like 5 hours or 6 hours, something like that. I think I could do that. Really,
That's why we need a course. We'll come to Brazil.
Yeah.
really,
It'll
really.
be great.
It will be amazing. Just tell us more about your course. How do you teach? How do you teach all of that?
So just as we're talking it, so believe it or not, there isn't that much talking from me on my courses. There's a lot of group interaction and doing. So what I try to do on my courses is in fact, I learned this style of interactive teaching here in Minneapolis. There's actually a group that teaches adult interactive education. And I always say to therapists, the way you teach is the way you were taught. And so I had to break that mold by going on courses that got it out of me. I don't use any PowerPoint. I use a lot of video interaction. I use group interaction, and everything we do is as though, the easiest way to describe it is though the people on the course are the patient, not the therapist. And some of the roles I give people are, next time you see a patient, put yourself in their shoes. Yeah. And so there's homework. We send people home. My courses, I hate these courses that say something you can do on Monday morning. When you come on my course, the only thing you can do on Monday morning is try and change yourself. I give people 6 to 8 week goals of changing something about their self. You can't go on a course at the weekend and change a patient. You can go on a course at weekend and start to work on you. This thing of, oh, I learned this on a course, let's try it on you. Yeah, I'd be really happy as a patient if that's what you did, because you're going to be skilled at that you learned this weekend. So this thing of, there's nothing you can apply on Monday morning on my course. There's things you can start to work on with the man in the mirror, that's you, or the woman in the
learning, no?
Yeah, where you have to start applying, where you will change, and that will change the individual sat in front of you. So some of the lessons we try are, next time you see a patient, try the intent relevance, and you'll fail. It's like getting new shoes, but they won't know. They don't know you're trying this. Rather than use a new technique, use a new way of listening and start practicing that. So on the courses, we practice all the skills on each other. One of the things I'm keen on is the teach back method. So on the first hour or two of the course, we just have interaction. It's like you can see people's heads, and on the walls are colored posters that I've drawn. So the whole manual, the course manual, I draw by hand in color and stick it on the walls. So it's all over the walls when you arrive. It's like being back at kindergarten, and it's colorful and it's play, and you get scented markers, and I split you into groups and we play games. But around about an hour to 2 hours. Yeah, we have crayons, colored crayons, and they smell, they're nice smells. And then 2 hours in, I split you into groups and I ask for volunteers to teach the group something they've learned on the course already. And we do that throughout the course. And the reason I encourage them to do that is because if you learn something, teaching it back to another person makes it a more powerful realization of what you haven't learned, and in the bits you're missing. So it's this safe space environment where you're in a small group of 5 and you're teaching, and they're all going to do it, but only volunteers. Nobody's forced to do these things, just like people. So the whole course develops this interactive feel of how it will be moving through a clinical encounter. So that the whole course is, they don't realize this, the whole course is taught from greeting. How do I greet this group? I've never met this. There was 30, I think there was 29 people I'd never met before, who few of them speak English. So there's this communication difficulty. So I say to them, well, this is going to be tough, isn't it? I'm going to have to communicate 2 days worth of knowledge to people who don't speak English. So we have a translator. So I use the translator in a fashion that's different than they used before, because I use him as my brain. So I say something in English and I say, okay, now you're going to listen to my brain and what it's thinking. So it comes in Serbian to them, just like you would in Portuguese. And I say, then he says it back to me, and I say, this is like your brain's inner voice that it's talking to you. So we use, and that's what patients are doing. So while I'm silent, while he's translating, that's your patient thinking quietly. You don't need to talk. So you're utilizing all these things in the room. So getting to know, by the end of the hour, I have to know 29 people in the room. And I assess them. I assess them for who I'm going to use as patients. And they don't know. And then about an hour in, after that hour, I say, okay, I'm going to demonstrate the whole course in 20 minutes. And I'm going to demonstrate it on the guy with the sore shoulder over there. And they go, how did you know he had a sore shoulder? He said, because we did some group activities of dancing and raising our arms and jigging about, and he couldn't raise his hand above his head. So one of the things about being a clinician is observing people's disability quite quickly. And they go, oh. And so I'm going to run you through a quick assessment with him to show you the whole course. So we pick the person with the pain and we do a quick assessment and nothing like, we just quickly run through something and say, try that, and off we go. And then we go back to the course. So the whole course builds on the fact we're doing exactly what we did with him, but we are learning now. Would you like to learn how to do that quickly? Yes. So it's this thing of, we show you the whole, and then we show you the steps. And as I point out to them, the steps don't make the whole. The whole is as it will be. It doesn't need the steps, but you can't get there without learning the steps. Because once you're at the end of the course, you'll look back and think, wow, I can actually do the whole. Because we do. People do it, we get people interacting and assessing each other. So it's this thing of, it's not about what you can do on Monday morning. It's about over the next 6 to 8 weeks after the course. And it'll be interesting for me to go back, because the second course I'm teaching, only the people who came on the first course are invited. It's just a special, and I think half the group are coming. And they know, because they've been with me for 2 days, is they're going to teach the course, not me. Because it's not my course, because they're going to apply. The bit I don't do on the first course is show you how to use technique. I show you how to use self-treatment first. And if we need technique, I'll say, we'll do this on it. But so they're going to learn how to apply the techniques they already know into the paradigm. And this paper I sent you that I've written a letter about, this novel idea that somebody's come up with of integrating modern manual therapy into a patient-centered paradigm. Look, it doesn't need integrating. What it needs is people to have a paradigm shift. And the people who need the paradigm shift are the clinicians, not the patients. and we've talked about this. This paper is written by some really clever people who I respect that have published this with the great intent of saying to manual therapy, look, we're in the dark ages, where a modern way of doing this is to become patient and person focused. But they miss the mark, because what they're doing is a patchwork quilt approach. They're saying, oh, we can add patient-centered things into manual therapy. Yeah, guys, that's not how it's going to work. That's not how it's ever worked. You can't take a bit and add it to another bit where it never belonged and put it in a quilt and make a beautiful blanket. What the goal is to be a person-focused therapist. That needs you to change, not manual therapy. Manual therapy has no will. It's just an object of it's a tool you use. It has no desire. It doesn't care what you think about it. It doesn't care if Adam Meekins thinks it sucks. It just is. It's a philosophical position. But what they miss on the mark is this. You can't put somebody in the middle of anything. That's a misinterpretation of the English word center. It is the word focus. Center means two things, the middle or the focus. And when you talk about McKenzie's centralization phenomenon, it means focal point, not middle. That's the other mistake people make. So I have this bugbear about the word center, and I think we should replace it with focus. And we talked about this, drawing out into a global view and going into a microscopic view if we need. In fact, in Engel's paper on biopsychosocial, he talks about the microscopic biological view of molecules, bacteria, coming out to the whole human ecosystem. So this thing we make mistakes of is our understanding. And in this paper they've written, it's about intertwining bits and bobs of dogma. They describe manual therapy techniques in this case study where it's a closing down phenomenon. It's a closing down procedure. They have a closing down problem. And I'm thinking, that's bio. He's still stuck in a model of biomechanical thinking. And then they talk about, well, in the other scenario, we asked the person about his life and his interactions, and he was going through a divorce, and we're caring, empathetic people. That's nothing to do with biopsychosocial. That's just this splitting up of, oh, we found a closing down procedure, bio. Then we were nice people and empathetically listened to him about his psychological distress and his social environment. One more time, it doesn't work like that. Here is a man sat in front of us who is distressed. How is he coping? What is he not coping with in his life? He would have told us he's going through a divorce. Wow, I am empathetic to that, but I need to be compassionate, not empathetic. Compassion drives action. Empathy just drives, oh, how awful. I'm understanding, that's awful. Oh, that will be terrible to go through. That must be something that's causing you distress. Yeah, but we need to do something for this man, which is listen, understand, gain his trust, and say, look, in your history that I've just received, you said lying down reduces your pain to 2 out of 10. What do we need to do to get it to 0? Do I need to intervene? We've gone through this already. Do I need to intervene, or is there some movements you already know that would get it beyond 0, beyond 2 to 0? Do I need to touch you? Remember the question? Do I need to touch you? This thing of it's a closing down problem is irrelevant. It will still have a closing down problem, whether I believe it or not. But is there a way under his own steam? Well, he said to me in his history, 2 out of 10. That is better than the 7 and the 4 he's presenting with. Then lie down and show me. Is there something we can do in lying that gets you to 0? Do I need to touch you? See what it is? So if he has a closing down procedure as described in this paper, he probably has like a shift or a lateral. But I don't need to touch him. There are ways we can reason through this first. So my criticism, my letter states this. We're putting the cart before the horse. We're patchwork quilting things. We don't need to integrate anything. We need to change clinicians and how they interact with patients to fit into their techniques of manual therapy, meaning first seek to understand the patient, then understand if he needs a technique. And at that point, together synergize, and he can then go on his way and self-treat. But this thing of, well, we need to stick to this old dogma of, I find a problem, and in the end, the poor patient was sent home anyway. He got the same treatment in both scenarios, which I don't quite understand what was the point of the paper if he ends up having the same thing. But we were quite empathetic to his divorce situation, and he's sleeping rough in a tent. Well, that's not how person-focused care works. Person-focused care says this: here is a human being who's suffering, not coping. What can I do to assist him with solutions so his problem is copable? That's what it says. He's interacting in an environment, and can I, as a physical therapist, interact with him physically that will assist him to, so if he's less pain, be able to cope with his current situation, which is also distressing. So he has less distress. He may lose sleep because of his divorce, but he won't be losing sleep because of his pain. So I am the assister of the pain levels, and if I need to, I can refer him to another individual who can help him with his psychosocial problems that may need other assistance, such as money, social care, sociologist, or a psychologist. And that would be my argument. That's the argument of my letter, put briefly.
What do you think would it be your take-home message of all this we've been discussing here for this whole time? What would be your take-home message?
Stop trying to change the person sat in front of you becoming for care. Change yourself first. Your changes, your ability to change yourself as a clinician will have a dramatic effect on the people sat in front of you. Meaning, if you become an empathetic listener, you also need to become a rational compassionist. Meaning, it's great to empathize, but if you have nothing to do, as in you don't want to help people sat in front of you, what's the point? We all talk about empathy. We're really talking about compassion as clinicians. Compassion drives the action of doing treatment. So be receptive, be present, be caring. That's the essence of a good clinician. Don't try to treat a person, just try to understand them. Changing yourself, how you view the clinical encounter, changes the clinical encounter. I think Wayne Dyer said, when we change the way we look at things, the things we look at change.
All right.
Amazing. We have a final. We are going to end our podcast, but we have a joke that we want to make with you.
Okay, I'm good for jokes.
Here in Brazil, at the COVID-19 pandemic, we have a chloroquine, you know,
yeah, hydrochloroquine, yeah,
hydrochloroquine, that we thought it's gonna work with COVID-19, so we have big problem with that. So we have the moment with hydroxychloroquine here, that it's the placebo moment.
Right.
So we need you to choose the best placebo that you know in history of your 14 years of practice. Which is the best placebo that you ever know?
Okay, there's a thing called, let me see if I can pronounce it right, and this is actually true, Orbical. It's a pill. It's an orange-colored pill. It's called Orbical. And it's a bit like my handle, Ret Looping. And it was given to children in Germany, and it was on sale in Germany for years. It's called Orbical, and it had miraculous results on pain. And mothers and fathers, doctors used to say to mothers and fathers, best thing for pain, this will cure your kids. Just explain to them that Orbical is one of the best painkillers on the market. And it was fantastic. It's been taken off the market, by the way, because it's a placebo by deception. In fact, it's placebo spelled backwards. And you can look it up. It's a true story. So if you spell placebo backwards, I think it spells Orbical. And it's a tablet they used to give to children. So I often say this, look, Schrodinger, you know Schrodinger's cat?
Yeah.
So contextual effects and placebo, there's this thing, Steve Camper says, placebo's nonsense because you can't have nothing giving you an effect. And he's absolutely right. So imagine this. This is for Brazilians and Schrodinger's placebo. You take a box, you close it, you wrap it up in gold paper and a big blue ball. That is Schrodinger's placebo, meaning it's the external wrapping, theoretical interaction, everything in your clinic, your personality, what you say to patients, the fun you have with them, how you are, just like a first date, the beautiful gold paper and the blue bow, like Christmas. You have no idea whether there's a real treatment in the box or nothing. That is the essence of placebo, building the expectation that this is a beautiful gift gives you the reaction. Of course, the nocebo effects when you open the box and there's nothing in, but the answer to patients is you don't need anything. Look, you are cured without anything. That's the placebo effect. But the nocebo would be, you'd be disappointed there wasn't anything in the box. But Schrodinger's placebo states that an empty box with a beautiful wrapping is either something active or something inactive till the box is open. It's how we build the expectation. It's like when I'm at Christmas, I get a big box with a pair of socks in and I'm disappointed. But when it was sat under the tree, I was really excited. So the other placebo we had during the COVID epidemic here was the horse dewormer, ivermectin. So at least you didn't probably get that. Yeah. And it's this thing, look, hydrochloroquine is a treatment for malaria. Ivermectin is a treatment for horses. Take it at that.
Take whatever you want. Choose one.
Take what you wish.
David, I just want to thank you very much for all the lessons. I could listen to you for about 6-7 hours or just one whole day. And I hope see you here in Brazil soon to have dinner, have conversations. You are a great physical therapy. I learned a lot with your knowledge that you just shared here with us. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I hope it's helpful to the listeners. And by the way, I'm going to tell you this. I've never in my life listened back to anything I've produced. So good luck. I won't be listening.
I want to thank you for accepting our invitation. We know each other from Twitter, X, and I appreciate your posting. You're always posting things that are relevant to our profession. That's why I chose you as our guest to come here and teach us some of your experience. And I know you're very concerned with doing it right, in spite of the fact that you're 41 years experienced in the profession. You had your place and with McKenzie, you respected, and there in Australia, New Zealand, and I'm sure there in Minnesota. And we hope we see you soon here in Brazil, teaching us, giving your courses here, and we'll keep in touch more now than before, because now we've met each other. It was a great pleasure having you here.
We've had our first date. See, we've gained trust and understanding. It's whole process. Well, guys, good luck with your endeavor. Hopefully this will work out great for you both.
Yeah.
It will. Just let me finish in Portuguese. Pessoal, esse foi o nosso podcast Osteopatia Científica. Eu agradeço demais ao David, agradeço demais ao Léo, que é o nosso host aqui. Foi muito legal. Espero que vocês consigam assistir com as legendas para vocês entenderem a quantidade de informações que a gente teve nesse caminho todo. E eu vou falar uma coisa de verdade que eu acredito muito. Que eu acho que eu e o Léo aprendemos mais do que qualquer outra pessoa. Então a gente aproveita mais do que qualquer outra pessoa o fato de estar aqui. Léo, muito obrigado. Pode deixar suas palavras aí para a galera.
Obrigado, Léo, pelo convite, essa nossa interação, esse nosso projeto que começou agora. O que o Léo falou, a gente aprendeu muito. O David é um cara que tem um conhecimento vasto, é uma pessoa importante, fez parte da construção do McKenzie, da escola do McKenzie, sabe muita coisa e vem muita coisa boa por aí. A gente tem uma lista de convidados aí já construída, a gente quer mais sugestões de convidados. e vamos fortalecer a ciência, vamos fortalecer a nossa prática. Muito obrigado a todo mundo por estar aqui, por nos assistir. A gente se vê em breve. Abração.
Thank you very much, David, again.
Thank you, David.
Nice to meet you both.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm off to have my dinner.